Hi there. My name's Richard Griffiths, and I'm the founder and curator of the Silk Road Virtual Museum. So welcome to this launch meeting. I'd like to say a few words by way of introduction. I mean, there was never a single Silk Road. It refers to a series of trails and tracks that basically connected markets between China, Eurasia, Europe, and all places in between. And all those places in between were all pretty important as well. And it didn't just carry silk, of course, it carried various other products to and fro from Asia to Europe, Europe to Asia as well. In addition, it's worth saying that the roads and trails weren't there all the time. You crossed vast expanses of desert with no indication, grasslands, mountains, all without any real tracks available. The second thing I think we need to say about the Silk Road, we mustn't pretend it's a period of perpetual peace. In fact, it was punctuated by wars, and the wars were very different from the sort of wars we had today. There was no Geneva Convention. When cities were taken, not only was often the entire population murdered, but the entire city destroyed. Those that survived were often carried away in slavery or deported to other parts of the country. But in between, when there were periods of peace and trade was allowed to flourish, people started moving, and with the people moved ideas, religions, technologies, experiences, cultures, and it's that produced this rather unique Eurasian identity. The heydays of the Silk Road were good. The third thing I want to say is that the arts you're going to be seeing in the Silk Road Museum is very much an elite art. It's art appreciated by the rulers and the wealthy. But the majority of the population had little access to that. Their lot was the daily grind of existence. And they left, in the end, very little knowledge or record of themselves. Also remember that not only were there toiling classes, but slavery was endemic throughout all these societies. Prisoners of war would become slaves. People that were traded for slaves, victims of or perpetrators of crime, would be punished by slavery. So, having ended on that nice and happy note, it's time for me then to say, let's have a little look at the Silk Road and let me show you round the basic details of how it all worked. When you go to our website, and most of you I think will have found it, but the address is marked up there, we say welcome to the Silk Road virtual experience. At the top, there are easy guides to where to go in the rest, and you're introduced to this map here. Now, the map allows you different points of references along the Silk Road itself, and if you note in the top, there is a time bar that allows you to select subdivisions along the road. This is the first subdivision. It covers the period 500 to 1000 CE. CE basically means Common Era. It's AD for the more old-fashioned of us in this world. And it allows you to take a tour starting in the Tang dynasty in the east, passing through the Tibetan Empire, along through the areas dominated by the Sogdian merchants, who were really the fluidity that linked the Silk Road together. Then we pass through the Sasanian Empire, which was the predecessor of the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, and we arrive at Byzantium, which was then also known as Constantinople, present-day Istanbul. And then we go right up north to the Vikings, who were trading along the Asian rivers down to Baghdad, and they formed the final link then in this period of our Silk Road history. Now, if you press on any of the buttons, and this is basically what you see, you get a short description of each of the sites. You can then press a button that'll take you straight to the museum. In addition, you can look at the e-libraries that gives you detailed resources to look at, and we'll come back to those later. And there are brochures with features that we actually like in the museum to introduce you to the museum, and those brochures, of course, can also be downloaded. So if we move to the next period that covers the next 500 years from 1000 to 1500, again, we can do the same trail. We start at the Ming dynasty and its predecessor, the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. Then we come to two areas where the Mongols actually dominated Central Europe, the Timurid Empire and the Golden Horde. Then we move to this very small kingdom, Cilicia, which was a Christian Armenian kingdom on the edge of this Christian area, threatened on the one hand by the Mongols from the east and also by the Mamluks, a slave army that claimed the kingdom of Egypt and took over Egypt. Then we again move to Byzantium, where we feature the last days of Byzantium before it gets conquered by the Ottomans. And we end our journey then in Venice, the home of Marco Polo, the great and famous European explorer. Now, we also have a number of special exhibitions, and we put some dots on the map just to fill up the map, to be honest. The first is the afterlives along the Silk Road. I mean, everybody traveled on the Silk Road. They had one thing in common, they all died, but what happened afterwards was interesting. And here we started looking at some of these. We started a bit in alphabetical order, so we look at the Buddhists and then the Christians, and we'll be adding more and more as it goes on. The caravanserai were buildings that dotted along the Silk Road, usually in the time when things were going well, where caravans could rest overnight and refresh themselves. Then we'd have a nice exhibition dealing with chess, which originated in India, spread through Persia, and by 1500, it actually covered all areas of the Silk Road in different forms. And of course, if you're traveling the Silk Road, you need some idea of where you're going. So we actually have a map room. I mean, how did the people at the time view their world and how did they portray it so that other people could see it and understand it? And then finally, we have the largest ever exhibition that we've done so far, Silk Along the Silk Road, which covers silk as it's produced and consumed over 1,000 years of its history. So those special exhibitions cut across the chronologies and straight across time. Now, if you go to the things, one of the things we pride ourselves with are the e-libraries. We don't try to teach people anything inside the museum setting. We try to encourage people to read more. And so we offer you then a range of literature. This is one example here of what you see in Tibet. And we've selected a number of free online articles. You should be able to click in there and go straight to them, and a few videos each time to enhance your experience. And then in addition, I'd like to show you very briefly, these are the sort of brochures we produce with a bit of background on the museums and highlighting some of the artifacts that we particularly liked. Now, let's have a look at what you'll see in the museums themselves. This is the first museum. It's the afterlife as perceived by Buddhists. If you look carefully, the final portrait artifact and the first one are exactly the same because they believed in reincarnation. But at the back there, you see a nice little stairway. And if you go there and click there, you'll be transported straight to the next exposition, which is devoted to the lives of Christians, which we are also portraying. Here, some rather gruesome graves to show how they saw their lives in the afterlife. And then the final one I'd like to show you is Byzantium in the modern period, the flourishing there of the mosaics and art just before the conquest there by the Ottomans. You've got one of the Ottoman soldiers there admiring his work or admiring the map in the museum itself. So what have we produced? Well, in numbers now, we have 20 special themed exhibitions containing 968 artifacts, all attributed as far as we can to the sources where you can find them in real-life museums and collections. The libraries have collected almost 800 pieces of free online literature to various aspects of the cultures that you'll be meeting, and over almost 100 videos, all available free at your fingertips from your experience in the Silk Road Museum. So I think that brings me to the next piece of my presentation. And that is my great pleasure then to introduce the speakers to you. We have a number of speakers who are here. And the first speaker I'd like to introduce is Dr. Philippe Paycam, who is the director of the International Institute for Asian Studies, which gave us the seed money to start this large project, and for the last 6 years has provided an academic roof over my head. Philippe, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard, and good day, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone who is listening. I think, yes, I want to congratulate Richard and his team for having completed this first major step in establishing this virtual museum or Silk Road Museum. And to say that my institute, the International Institute for Asian Studies, as Richard mentioned, has been backing Richard in this endeavor. And we feel very privileged and honored to be part of this initiative, especially because our institute, which is focusing on Asia, is always interested in what we call Asia in the world, or global Asia, and how we should take always a broader, wider, more connected appreciation of what we considered Asia as a geography, as a collection of countries, civilizations, societies, etc. So, yeah, IAS, as our name indicates, is focusing on Asia, but it's also International Institute for Asian Studies, in a sense that we are based in the Netherlands. We are within the framework of the University of Leiden University, but we have a very wide mandate, in a sense that we are meant to facilitate and connect between different disciplines, different geographies, and different sectors of knowledge associated with Asia. And we organize a number of programs and activities, always in collaboration with partners in Asia, but also in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, and Middle East. And just as an example, we just completed our major biennial conference on Asia Studies, ICAS, International Convention for Asia Scholars, in Surabaya in Indonesia, which brought in, it was at the end of July. We had about 2,000 participants from more than 80 nationalities. So this is one of the things we do. We organize, facilitate these big events. We have a newsletter, which is also very well known, called The Newsletter. If you check on our website, www.iias.nl. And we have many activities. I don't want to talk too much about IS, but in this case here, we are very pleased to be part of this initiative that corresponds to our effort to disseminate knowledge of Asia and the world, in the world, such as the virtual museum that has been established on the Silk Road topic. So again, thank you very much, Richard. Again, congratulations, and you and your team. And we look forward to seeing the museum continue to flourish.
Okay, thank you very much, Philippe, for your support and for being here today. Our next speaker, I'm afraid, is unable to come, but I'd like to introduce her anyway, because she's very important in creating the museum. It's Claire Kutz from V21 Art Space. And when I was beginning to conceptualize how can you present 2D objects in a 3D form, it was with Claire and her team that we got the support for creating the first museums. And actually they're experimenting with some of the original ideas that we were trying. Claire was trying to come here, but she's stranded by floods in England. Of course, it never rains in England, and when it rains, it pours. So that proves that saying. But Claire's support was incredibly generous and important at the beginning of our work. The next speaker I'm hoping to introduce is Jona from Kunstmatrix.
Hello.
Jona, here is welcome, Jona. Um,
Hello.
Jona has been working with me for the last year, and her team in Kunstmatrix have been very important again in developing the way in which we've been trying to show our exhibitions and everything in different environments. And Joan and I have been talking a lot about how virtual museums can actually enhance people's experiences. And she has the expertise much more than I do from Kunstmatrix. So please introduce yourself, your work, and yeah, hi. Thanks for being
Hi.
here.
Thank you for letting me speak here. This is a very exciting part of the work at Kunstmatrix, and actually having seen the whole project grow while you were working on it and while expanding it has been a very, very grateful experience, especially seeing all of the exhibitions being published now. So thank you so much for basically doing all this because it's really impressive even from people who have been active in this field for a while. So while Kunstmatrix is being mentioned as a company, it's a Berlin-based company. Kunst means art in German. So um, what is it? It is basically the technical platform that the whole exhibition experience runs on. So there, as in the internet world, there needs to be a place, a server where the software is technically being active on, and this is what Kunstmatrix is. And it also enables Richard, as a curator, for example, to have a vision and basically go for it, very practically said. So, with our platform, the curators can and will do most of the work themselves and choose all of their own images and have a concept and a mind and maybe just start playing with it and then have it grown into a full-blown museum, which this really has turned into. They have been active since 2009. And mostly, I would say, for commercial galleries and for single artists who are looking for a presentation platform and cannot or will not trust a commercial gallery. So the museum part of Kunstmatrix, which they are now also specializing on, came a bit later, maybe I would say around 2012 and the following years. And it is basically it's like a construction box that depending on what you're trying to achieve in terms of complexity and in terms of images and newer media and videos and all of these assets, um, you can basically try it out and then share it with the public. And this is also where we all think this project is basically a best case scenario. Um, there are so many things that are very intensely curated in this whole complex, and there are novelty presentation forms where we actually are grateful for our users to come up with a demand like, how can I show a large scroll that is actually meters long on a wall without using all the space? So there are videos that you will see in the exhibitions that you can just have run in front of your eyes, and it feels like you have two people rolling the scroll past your eyes, and you're actually sitting there like in a theater. And with the complexity of technical presentations, we're always very curious what Professor Griffith will come up with because the scaling of things that is only possible in the virtual world and could never be realized like this in any physical museum makes it fun and a novelty and so many things to go from one exhibition to the next, as was mentioned. technically provide the tools to do it. And if there are any questions of how to achieve this, we're there in the background. And I have to say, the great enthusiasm that we felt was being brought to this whole experimental stage and the finishing stage and the preparation stage has been a giant pleasure. So we can only hope that there will be many, many visits to many of these exhibitions. And that there will be, I don't know, feedback for more and questions and for e-libraries. And I have to admit, I have not seen everything of it yet. There are certain exhibitions that I have only explored very briefly because there wasn't anything to do technically in. So I'm still at the stage of awe where, like a child, I go into museum and I plan to not come out for a week. Um, are there any questions from anyone? So,
Yeah. Hi, Jona. You have a question from me. I
yes.
am just amazed because whenever I come to see you and I say, can you help? And you're always there to help. And I always feel so helpless. But I'm trying now we're trying to promote the idea of virtual museums in a broader front. School exhibitions, for example, people actually helping to participate in the conceptualization and design. And working with your team, I think, will be very, very good at going in these new directions. Do you think there are new directions for the Silk Road or the model that we're adopting here?
I think they're actually, it's a bit like in one of my favorite museums, the Metropolitan. There will be cordons closing off certain areas where there's work being done in the background. And as you and I know, we are actually changing media and adding a whole new presentation form to this museum, which is growing in the background. So while the first visitors are exploring the first 20 exhibitions, there's actually a network being spun that will catch open questions from one exhibition to the next and to the next, just in a different layer of wisdom. So um, I'm actually I'm so triggered with my curiosity of working with you in the next parts that will open that I know about, that I can't wait for your next presentation questions to come up because um, you always only ask us when you're stuck technically in some area and when you say I need assistance of the technical kind. And so you will already have a concept in the background of what it is supposed to look like, to do, to spin, to deactivate or activate when you click on it. So actually, and with audiences growing younger, hopefully, to visit museums like this on their mobile while they're sitting in the train, because that's also the beauty of these exhibitions. You can check them out on your tablet or on your mobile phone anywhere. You don't have to really have any special device. Um, I think it is really exciting to bring very old content into a very new phase of presentation. So that is one of the beauties of it. And don't worry about the helplessness. You are not. We have different problems.
Okay, Jona, thank you so much for your kind words and for all the help that you've been doing. And don't worry, we'll be in touch.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Claire and Jona have been very important in providing the setting, the material settings or the immaterial settings in which the museums have been placed. And one of the things we've been trying to do is to connect with various communities. And one of the great successes I had, and which has been a pleasure for me, was with my next guest here, that is Jane. So there, Jane? Jane Kershaw for Oxford University. ages ago, I was writing the textbook chapter on the Silk Road, and I spotted her research on coins of the Vikings, or the rings of the Vikings. And she gracefully said that she would be a footnote in my textbook chapter. And now she's a whole wall in my new museum. It's some of the most exciting research that's going on at the moment, and it's certainly transforming the views of the Vikings. So, Jane, I hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Richard, for reaching out in the first place, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. Congratulations on the exhibition, and of course, I'm very pleased to be a part of it. I'm an archaeologist working at the University of Oxford. I specialise in the Vikings, and in particular Viking silver, and that was the reason Richard reached out first in 2020 or 2021. Can it be that long ago? And he had a question particularly concerning the origins of silver in a ring that's known as a Permian arm ring, because it was produced in the Perm region of Russia. And he thought, well, how can we know what the origin of the silver in this ring form is? And that's how we got chatting. I had recently started a 5-year research project looking at the sources of silver in Viking rings, and had a new approach to it. And it's odd, really, to link the Silk Roads with the Vikings. You know, we tend to think of the Vikings as being quite far removed from it, and they were that sort of slightly one-off northern find spot on Richard's map earlier, but actually they did connect. They intersected with it, so they weren't maybe the people active along the east-west route, but they most certainly intersected with it, took items from the Silk Road north, and would have brought items like forest products, so furs, amber, wax, also people, slaves, to the south as well. So my kind of speciality, and the area that the exhibition focuses on, is really about silver. If we can find out where the silver in these items come from, then we can identify the underlying trade links that connect northern Russia to regions further south. There is a challenge in provenancing silver, because the Vikings, they melt down silver to cast into artifacts like arm rings and neck rings, elaborate brooches and the like. And when they do that, you can't see what the original form of the silver was. And therefore, the project that I've been running used scientific techniques, in particular lead isotope studies and also trace elements, to try to unravel some of the candidate sources that are going into this silver. So we spent 5 years analysing silver from hoards and from settlements across Scandinavia. And what we discovered was that there is a substantial presence of Islamic silver coins, known as dirhams, that go into these cast silver objects. We already know that dirhams reached Scandinavia in very large numbers in the 10th century on the back of this trade in furs and ambers and slaves. But what we discovered through this project is that actually the inflow of Islamic silver to Scandinavia is already very significant at the very outset of the Viking Age in the 9th century, which is when it's normally thought the Vikings got most of their silver through their raids in Western Europe, which means that even at the origins of the Viking Age, Scandinavia is deeply plugged into a northern arc of trade that runs through the Baltic region to northwest Russia and down the great Russian rivers to the Islamic Empire, with Baghdad at its center. So this is really the research story that's told in the displays in the virtual museum. And in some cases, we're actually publishing our research results through the medium of the virtual museum for the first time. And that's, from my academic perspective, that's a little odd actually, because we would normally go through a process of writing papers, submitting them to journals. They would go through a peer review process. We would get sort of comments and feedbacks, and we would publish them that way. We do that as well, absolutely. But I think there is also a need and a general shift in academia towards delivering the results of research, which is, after all, government funded, more directly to audiences who are interested in the results and without paywalls, because for most people outside of universities, it's not easy to access journal articles. And so when Richard proposed this online environment, I was very pleased to be able to use some of our project results, which were still ongoing, and the project's only just finished, and yet they're there for everybody to see. I think that the museum, it looks terrific, and as somebody who sort of created some of the content, it's actually very useful for me to think about the research results in a new light, because it really, chatting with Richard, it's sort of what are people interested in? What are the questions most people would ask? It's not my narrow, academic sense of this is Viking silver and the questions I would normally ask of the material, but what do people want to know? And how does the silver sit alongside other strands of archaeological evidence and textual evidence to create a bigger picture? So I think seeing the silver alongside the trade in silk, for instance, is really important, and the trade in furs. And I think that's something that seeing the results in the context of the room which is the Vikings on the Volga, the Vikings in the East, I think that's something it does very successfully. And of course, I'm pleased that the project results can reach so many people. So thank you very much, Richard. And yes, any questions, please do ask.
Well, thanks a lot, Jane, for your, very clear. I think it's an excellent project. If you look, I've popped up a couple of new necklaces in the museum, and those were found in a tomb of a princess in basically far eastern China from around the year 1000. And out of all the objects in that tomb, gold, silver, pearls, jade, precious stones, 40% of the objects are Baltic amber. Mm. So you've got the other end there, and that exhibition will be part of the exhibition we'll be showing in November, when we'll be launching a new exhibition on our Silk Road adventure. Mm. But thank you for contributing this story. And don't worry, I'll be following your research with eager eyes. So it only remains for me now to introduce the last of our speakers. That's Professor Sarah Ward. Now, Sarah Ward is an underwater archaeologist at Dalian Maritime University in China. We've been working together for some years. In fact, we've jointly written a chapter on the Maritime Silk Road for the UNESCO volumes that's coming out in November of this year. And she's been very instrumental in helping me shape and frame the approaches, not to on-land archaeology so much as underwater archaeology, where a lot of our knowledge of trade routes between China and Asia, and within Asia and Arabia, and eventually through to Europe in the period before 1500, that is where it is found, that is where it will be found. So I hand over now to Sarah. Thank you very much. And Sarah's recorded hers because she is at the moment on her way to a conference in Indonesia. So Sarah, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Ward, Professor of Maritime Archaeology and Underwater Cultural Heritage Management here at Dalian Maritime University in Northeast China. It is a great honor, privilege, and pleasure to be here with you today to launch the incredible Silk Road Virtual Museum, a significant International Institute of Asian Studies backed initiative that transcends the boundaries of the traditional museum, and one that I'm very happy to have supported, albeit in a small way. As many of you know, the Silk Road is an ancient network of trade routes connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa. Yet, as the Silk Road Virtual Museum reveals, It is so much more than that. For over 2,000 years, the Silk Road has been a bridge between civilizations. It connected people, it facilitated the rise and fall of empires, and along its routes, ideas, knowledge, customs, traditions, and technologies were culturally exchanged, and arguably, they still are. But how, in 2024, do we engage with this interconnected past in today's world where challenges like economic instability, political tensions, and war loom large? Well, traditionally, we've turned to physical museums. For centuries, they've been the primary keepers of our history. We saved our holiday time. We travelled by plane, car, or train, sometimes thousands of miles, to walk through their hallowed halls, to glimpse ancient artifacts encapsulated in glass, to read carefully crafted descriptions about the past, or to listen to the curator's interpretation, all to immerse ourselves in cultures far, far removed from our own. Yet as spectacular as many of these museums are, they have their limitations. Museums, as we all know, are constrained by physical space, by geographical location, by budget, clearly, visitor capacity, environmental vulnerability, political will, and, as we've seen in recent years, in some cases, by terrorist activity. Either accidentally or intentionally, not all cultures and not all perspectives are represented equally in every institution. And often, the most significant artifacts remain locked away in archives, cabinets, inaccessible to the public. That's why the virtual Silk Road Museum is so important, and why I am proud to be part of today's launch. The Silk Road Virtual Museum transcends these boundaries by digitizing Silk Road art and artifacts, stories and landscapes, creating a global museum that can be visited anywhere, anytime, whether at home, on the tube, or traveling at 40,000 feet. The Silk Road Virtual Museum is at your fingertips, anywhere, anytime. So what makes the virtual Silk Road Museum so powerful is not just the fact that it exists online, but the immersive, interactive, engaging experience it provides. Visitors like you and me, we can explore historical sites, view artifacts in 3D, and dive deeper into the stories of people who lived centuries ago and may have worked along the Silk Road. You can experience the majesty of Samarkand, the ancient markets of Xi'an, and the rich cultural exchange of the Persian Empire. Anywhere, anytime. So why is it important? Why not stick to traditional museums? We have so many. Well, the answer for me lies in inclusivity, accessibility, and representation. Not anyone, or not everyone, can visit physical museums due to geographical, financial, physical constraints, and sometimes because it takes a lot of time. In fact, if you think about it, the vast majority of the global population will never visit the world's major cultural institutions. But the Silk Road Virtual Museum is set to change that. The virtual museum democratizes access to our shared and mutual Silk Road heritage. It opens doors to everyone, regardless of where you live, regardless of your background, and regardless of your culture or language. Visitors aren't just passive observers. They, or we, engage directly with the past, and we do it in new and imaginative ways. So the Silk Road Virtual Museum offers, as the name suggests, virtual tours and immersive activities that bring Silk Road art and archaeology into the here and now, whether it's Ming blue and white porcelain, Mamluk glass, or Venetian silks, the best of the best. So today's launch, as you know, focuses on the Overland Silk Road. But I don't think I'm breaking any confidences by mentioning that in the new year, we will expand into the Maritime Silk Road. The Maritime Silk Road Virtual Museum will explore the ships, sailors, and seafaring routes that connected China to Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, and beyond. It'll highlight the significance of these ships and the critical role they've played in connecting distant people and civilizations. The remains of these ships and the once flourishing port towns that they visited reveal much about the shipboard communities, the knowledge systems of the people on board, and the stories of trade and cultural exchange that flowed freely across the seas. The Maritime Silk Road Virtual Museum also offers an immersive experience that allows users to explore coastal and underwater cultural heritage sites, almost like you were diving there in person. However, it's here I need to pause and kind of highlight an important issue, and that is that protecting these coastal and underwater cultural heritage sites presents significant challenges, particularly here in Asia. Inadequate legal frameworks, limited compliance and enforcement capacity, ongoing commercial exploitation, and a lack of public awareness, to name just a few, still hinder preservation efforts. Shipwrecks are not just relics, they are time capsules offering invaluable insights into ancient technologies, into human ingenuity and cross-cultural exchanges, and so much more. Remnant shipwreck cargoes, they can tell us about the goods and commodities that were traded, the relationships between civilizations, the spread of customs, traditions, and technologies, and which is important for my university, the evolution of navigation. So, by showcasing humanity's submerged legacy, the Virtual Silk Road Museum will emphasize the need for greater preservation and safeguarding of these underwater sites, particularly in underserved regions where underwater cultural heritage remains vulnerable to looting, illegal salvage, and environmental threats. Through interactive exhibits and digital storytelling, the museum will inspire a deeper understanding of these fragile resources, these unique, non-renewable, irreplaceable resources, and encourage public advocacy for their protection. Ultimately, including the Maritime Silk Road in this virtual platform underscores the ocean's role as a conduit for cultural exchange. In my opinion, just as vital, if not more, than its overland counterpart. The ships that plied these waters were not only vessels of trade, but also carriers of art, ideas, religion, and technologies, linking East and West in ways that still resonate today. By bringing these stories to life, the museum will contribute to a more complete and a more inclusive understanding of the rich history shaped by these two Silk Roads. And in today's world, a world that often feels divided, the Silk Road Virtual Museums remind us of our interconnectedness. They demonstrate that diversity, people-to-people connections, and the exchange of goods, information, ideas, technologies, customs, and traditions have always been at the heart of human progress. And now with virtual technology, we can continue that legacy of cultural exchange anywhere, anytime. I would like to give my sincerest and heartiest congratulations to my good friend and colleague, Professor Richard T. Griffiths, and everyone involved in this incredible project. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for the recording and the kind words, and good luck in Indonesia. Sarah's working with other colleagues in Asia now to try to increase awareness of the history that lies still to be discovered in the region and efforts to preserve it. Now, we've come to a time, we're a bit pushed for time, but I'm going to try and answer at least some of the questions that have come in from our readers. We asked people on our newsletter if they had any questions. Many of them I've answered directly via email. But before I do that, I've just noticed I've left one other item out. Very important in this is that we're launching a new exhibition that's opening today into a tomb that had lain undiscovered for well over a millennium. And the introduction of this tomb is going to be by Louisa Stewart from Blue Ninja, who is about now to introduce the tomb and show you around it. And after that, you'll be able to visit it yourself at your own pace and your own tempo.
Hello, I'm Louisa Stewart, CEO of Blue Ninja, and I'm privileged to be showing you around our latest exhibition for the Silk Road Virtual Museum launch. Welcome to the Chuan tomb of Zhen Fan. This tomb was uncovered in 2018 in Chuan City in the Shaanxi province of China. Workmen stumbled across a single-chamber brick tomb with a sloping tomb passage undisturbed for almost 1,300 years. In June 2024, city archaeologists released a report of what they found. They described a mural tomb depicting guardians and assistants, which has never been seen before or will again, as the site was filled in again to prevent further damage. This is the first presentation in a virtual museum setting. So who was Zhen Fan? Let's explore further. As you move through the exhibition, you have the ability to use the next and previous buttons, and you can move freely around the room with your mouse. Each piece has information buttons, so you can find out more, as well as increase the size of the image so it's easier to see the detail. Let's start with the tomb entrance. And you're wandering around, and you've got these different guards here. Then you've got an overview of the tomb, the square interior of the tomb. So you can see if you got very close to where the pictures actually were alongside the tomb bed. So you can see the paintings as they were drawn, and these are the introductory paintings on either side of the garden. Then you've got these men, and at the very top you've got auspicious animals, north, south, east and west. Let's keep moving around the exhibition. And we'll get to the tomb guards now on the inside. They're welcoming you in. And we've got a shadow figure there. We think it's deliberate, expressing some other feature, but we don't know exactly what it is. There's the other shadow figure. There's two guards, and that's inside the tomb. So now we're going to move around the scene. So the first scene here is a pasta shop. We can click the instructions to see what is going on. The one at the top is making noodles. On the fourth image, you can see an animal being grilled. He's going to end up in the pot, and the pot will be nicely steaming, which you can see as you go down. Meanwhile, grain is being ground, water being drawn, items are being cut. Women were involved in washing or mixing things in water. he's got a pasta shop or a noodle shop or a dim sum shop. And then you start with these series of paintings, following the story around the room. So we start with the painting of a flower. That's looking pretty good. The information will tell you which flower it is, etc. And then you start to see a series of 6 paintings. In each one, a man appears, and he's doing something very different in each of them. But what is he doing? What is the scene? The scene changes. He's not always in the same place. Here is a nice friendly little snake coming up and saying, "Would you like a pearl?" Well, this could be a life-changing event, except the 2 tombs down the road, somebody else gets a pearl from a snake. Here he is, carrying wood on his back. That's another theme that comes back. Why is he carrying wood? Is it for a ceremony? Is he doing some sort of Buddhist penance or something? We don't know. This is an interesting one. You don't really see it very well, but he's pointing up at a tree, and out of his hand there's vapors coming out. People think that it's some part of a ritual, a Taoist ritual of water purification or something, but we're not certain. And he is still wandering around. This little stripe thing comes up a couple of times. That is a burial mound. But note the burial mound's sideways stripes and down stripes are different, so different locations. Now, to match the flower we saw at the beginning, we see the flower at the end, and now it's wilting, dying, and perhaps being reborn as it drops its seeds. And then we get to the other end. So we saw at the beginning it was flanked by 2 guardians. Here we see the lady of the house, but we also see a blonde guy there. I mean, there's no question that he's not Chinese. So he's a groom, but he'd be a foreign groom. And you've got camels there and horses as well. So that's all part of the story. So here we have a bit more information about what else this tomb holds. Pottery jars, figurines. But we also have some 3D vases. These are the couple of the biggest vases that they found. We have so much more to share with you on the Silk Road Virtual Museum, and we'll be coming back soon with a couple more of these tombs, the Taiyuan tombs, to tell more of the story. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you very much, Louisa. And this is indeed our latest museum. The information about it was only published about 2 or 3 months ago, so we're very excited to be able to show it to you. And in November, we'll be following up with a couple of other tombs from the same region, and again with these strange paintings on the wall. Now, as I said when I messed it up, but that happens, we have tried to answer readers' questions sent in to us from our readers of our newsletter. We're running close to time, and I would like to spend a bit of time to say thank you properly to everyone. So I'm going to take a couple of those questions and try to answer them quickly, and we'll be answering them all. The ones that I haven't particularly answered already directly, we'll answer them all in the next newsletter or the newsletter after that. So keep those questions coming in. So the first question we have is why did the Silk Road flourish when other Silk Roads in Africa and South America did not? But a nice question, but I think we got to make 1 or 2 comments. Firstly, I said right at the beginning, the Silk Road was not a continuous success. There were periods where it was totally destroyed by warfare and unrest that accompanied it. And it's also possible, since our knowledge of Africa and Latin America, South America is also limited, that there might have been periods of growth of trade that we just simply haven't been able to record, and that have been grown over, especially in South America, by the rainforests. But basically, the argument or the answer to the question is 2 factors: geography and distance, or geography and markets. In Africa, you've got the Sahara Desert, you have various disease belts across that stop the flow north and south. You've also got relatively small market size, with the result that the trade that did exist there occurred mostly among staples like gold and salt. In Latin America, The major barriers, of course, are the Andes mountain range and the vast rainforests. But again, if we're emphasizing these sort of givens, I have to turn it round a little, because one thing you note or you see along the Silk Road when it does prosper is that governments are actively working in promoting trade along the Silk Road. So it's not just happening spontaneously, it's being facilitated by the protection that's given along the routes, by the accommodation that's afforded, by the markets that get created, and so on. So it's a good question, and one we haven't got one simple answer for. The second question from Singapore is another really very good question. How did the impact of the Silk Road work on science and technology? I'll answer this quickly. And Silk Road is not just commerce moving, people move. And when people move, the knowledge that they have, or the knowledge of knowledge, travels with them. And this then allows ideas and techniques to spread. I'll give a couple of examples very quickly. Mathematics is a very good example. It starts off in India, where the number 0 was invented, which is vital for the development of mathematics, then spreads to Western Asia and across to Europe. By the way, it's why we call Arabic numbers Arabic, to distinguish them from Roman numerals. There was a reason for that. Another one is astronomy, which started in Central Asia and Persia, and in the end blended Greek, Chinese, and Indian knowledge together to create a vital science then for being able to guide and travel at night. And then to turn briefly to technologies, let's have a look, simple list that many people will recite. Paper, printing, gunpowder, the compass, silk, all travel from China across the West, across the Silk Road areas, and into Europe and the rest of the world. We have another question, one that hits me straight to the heart. What would I actually like to see changed in, sorry, I lost my screen for a minute. What would I like to see in people's knowledge and perception? Well, again, I've just mentioned it, that the Silk Roads are not just traded in goods, cultural, intellectual, aesthetic, and human exchange also took place. What you see people basically is diverse people addressing broadly the same daily problems. Of course, those problems will differ by wealth and by rank, but the solution of those problems are expressed within different cultural contexts. So if we look from our own cultural perspective, we have to learn to appreciate this pluralism and diversity and see how it helped create a shared heritage for humanity. And all too often, we cannot do that today, or we don't do it today. So in this increasingly fractured and divided world, a view back into the past might allow us to readjust our focus and look at the world in a different way. And if we contribute a little to that, it'll be very successful, or I will guide you, very successful. Another interesting question that's difficult to resolve. Did women take part in the travels on the Silk Road? Well, yes and no is the answer to that, Camilla, in Brazil. You've got to remember that a lot of the northern tribes are nomadic tribes, and the women traveled with them, with the whole tribe, with their own allotted roles within those particular tribal societies. So in that context, they were always moving along the Silk Road. But if you mean are women engaged in the camel trains, the ones that we see traditionally, sets of camels going over the dunes, then not, possibly because all the men would sleep together in a tent, and possibly because of the prohibition then on having women. But not all of the Silk Road was traveled that way. Many of the bits were short distance traders, almost local peddlers, and women would engage in that trade as much as men. And don't forget, the trade road is not just about moving goods, it's about trading goods. So at the end of these stops along the Silk Road too, there would be markets. And in the markets, the women would have functions too, as entrepreneurs, as traders, or as producers of other services. And then finally, women played an important part in the dynastic arrangements that often held fragile alliances among competitive civilizations and held them together. Diplomatic marriage was quite common along the Silk Road, and that's part of the answer. I'll answer the other questions and anything else that arrives in the final selection when we publish our newsletter. So I'd like to wrap up now, if we can, with some words of thanks on my part to the people that have helped me on my journey. And we start when I actually retired officially from the university, and I was asked to go along and have a look at this Centre of Innovation that were being created, or was being created, keep an eye on it. And I went there and I found this incredibly exciting group of young people engaged in all sorts of dynamic questions and experiments with each other. And a lot of them had to do with the internet, which for a bit of an old fogey like myself was not exactly my burning hot topic. And being able to live and work with them, discussing ideas of how internet can be used for innovation became very important for me. And it was through the Centre for Innovation that I was introduced to Coursera. And Coursera was giving massive open online courses. Leiden was in the lead of doing that, and I was fortunate in being one of the first people involved with that. And I think many of the people who have registered here and here now might actually have been involved in my Coursera communities. Coursera convinced me that in cyberspace, we can actually create communities. And the first Coursera courses we did, people would set up discussion groups and talk together and offer help and assistance to each other. It was fabulous. And from there, we went on to experiment, and Leiden got the first award for innovation in Coursera for various experiments that we were doing. Then I need to repeat my thanks to the International Institute for Asian Studies for giving us the kickstart funding for the museum and having the confidence in doing so. And as I say, everybody there for providing an intellectual pillow for me to rest my head and to continue to enjoy academic life. And then finally, I have to thank Louisa and her staff and the team she's assembled and she and Blue Ninja have assembled and that have put this launch together. And last but not least, I have to thank Mickey Canton from Asia Americana International, a fellow traveler on this voyage who's contributed generously to the launch that made the launch possible. Mickey, when you wrote to me, you said onwards, and it's indeed onwards that we will go with a mission, both that I think we share, to help create some degree of mutual understanding in this increasingly fractured world. So thanks a lot, Mickey, for your support. And thank you everybody who's here today for attending this launch and for the comments that you've been given. And please do continue sending them to us. We didn't ever think that this was a top-down project. We need your help and ideas to help develop this further. And I'm very pleased to announce that we are producing a commemorative magazine to celebrate the launch. And that will be sent out to everyone who's here and everyone who's registered for this meeting on Friday this month, Friday the 27th of September. If you haven't had a chance yet, still opportunity on the website to register for this, and the magazine will be sent to you in electronic form. To say for those who probably aren't here, but from China, we'll be offering to send you an electronic recording of the launch if in fact your access to the channels for viewing it were blocked. So thank you everybody here for your time and attention for this, the launch of the Silk Road Virtual Museum. To say we'll be back in October to launch our new exhibition, and that will be on the Khitan Empire. Well, I'll tell you all about that next month. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support already, and I look forward to seeing some of you online later on. Thank you very much.